Well, hi Acadiana, and welcome to your Friday. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. This is Let's Talk Tropics. Thanks for joining me for lunch on this Friday. I know a lot of people on Fridays like to go ahead and cut out and start to enjoy their weekend. And a real quick happy Father's Day to all those dads that are out there that are going to have a great weekend as well. We're going to talk quite a bit about some activity that's out there. Of course, you've probably seen the National Hurricane Center's tropical weather outlook, where we've got a couple of areas that we've been watching. But first, I want to take a real quick look at some of our traffic cams here. Really a pretty day out there. It's hot though, 91 with a heat index of 97. So by Louisiana standards, this is like a cool spring day. I did want to go over real quick some of your plans ahead of time whenever we have tropical weather kind of threatening, but really not coming in our direction right now. So while there's tons of supplies and things out there, these are the things that you can gather right now: the batteries, flashlights, water, non-perishable food. Update your first aid kit. Medicines, make sure you have enough if you need to evacuate, and also make sure you know where you would get refills on your medicine if you have to leave town. Personal hygiene items and house cleaners. All your IDs and insurance and important papers, make sure you got those together in a watertight container, or you can save them as digital by taking pictures of them with your phone. And if you're going to stay at home, of course, you're going to need a basic tool set, do any repairs as needed. And whether you're at home or in the car, you're going to need entertainment for the kids, and you're also going to need all of the pet supplies. So those are a lot of things that we did talk about yesterday down in New Iberia at the Slyman Theater. I want to thank the Iberia Community Emergency Response Team for inviting me to their meeting there. I talked a little bit about the hurricane season and what we're kind of expecting. We also had the Department of Homeland Security director there as well that talked about different evacuations. And he also kind of mentioned the fact that Highway 90 is under construction, and that's the main evacuation route. And that was one of the things that I had kind of forgotten about, and I've been telling people make sure you got two different evacuation routes. Also, the sheriff of Beauregard Parish was there giving us his inside scoop of what they had to deal with that incredible Hurricane Laura that came through in 2020. So really, the way they had to deal with the incredible damage and the way they bounced back was really a great story. So thanks to all the folks at Iberia Community Emergency Response Team for bringing me there. And real quick, just looking, when we talked about Highway 90 being under construction, not only is it under construction over in St. Mary and much of Iberia Parish, but I almost completely forgot that all of the construction going on by the zoo here in Lafayette. So if you live down in Iberia and St. Mary, 182 LA 87 is probably your best bet if you're all the way down into St. Mary Parish. But once you get into Iberia, you can cut off on 31, 347. You got the highway that goes through Lauraville. If you really want to take the back roads and go up through Catahoula and up to Butte La Rose to meet I-10. But as long as you can get to Brobridge or Henderson, or even if you go west to Delcombe, Erath, and Abbeville and cruise northward from there, because Highway 90 is under construction and there's going to be a lot of people coming from other parts of the state through there, it's kind of up to us to take the other roads that we know better. And then once we get out of the evacuation zone, you can rejoin the freeways that are more familiar to all of us. So just a little thought there. As long as you have two different evacuation routes, you should be safe. So let's get to the 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center. And this was updated this morning. We'll get another update here in a little over an hour or so. But the Bay of Campeche, they're looking at a 50% chance for some development as a trough is going to be moving into that area. And it's basically everything that we've been showing you now for the last couple of weeks. But off the Atlantic coast, there is still disturbance 90L. It has a slight chance for development. It looks a little bit better organized at the surface, but you can kind of see the spin that is currently there at the surface, but you can see much of, so here's the spin right here, but the thunderstorms are way out here. So you got some wind shear that's coming in and messing with this storm. So it is pretty disorganized still. And the recon plane that was supposed to go out there today, well, that flight has been canceled once again. So let's look at what else is going on out there before we get to the Bay of Campeche. We got a pretty good tropical wave working its way off the Atlantic coast or the African coast rather. And we also had a pretty big area of convection over the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean. But as you can see, with that particular tropical wave, there's just really not a lot associated with it. It's got some Saharan dust up here and some drier air that's trying to infiltrate. So we haven't seen a lot going on. Doesn't mean that that tropical wave is finished. It just means there's just not a lot of action happening along it right now, more like a dry front. And there are a couple of other tropical waves that are working their way across the Atlantic right now, with the moisture now starting to build over the far western Caribbean and out here into the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. And some of this is going to be heading off toward the west, getting over toward the Yucatan Peninsula, and eventually in the Bay of Campeche, where we think there might be some development a little farther down the road. Some Saharan dust over the Caribbean, but there's all that moisture trying to work westward over Central America and now into the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So right now there's still a bit of a front that's out here over the middle part of the Gulf. So we've got some dry air up here, including for us here in Louisiana, and then all the moisture is trapped out here and continuing to move off toward the west. And this is really the area where we think we're going to be seeing some development sometime early next week. So let's just kind of review. I'm not going to go through a dozen computer models. We're just going to go through the last two this time around. As most of you know, there's been pretty good consistency both in the Euro and the GFS model over the past couple of days. But we'll start with the GFS. This is what ran very early this morning. And you can still see that there's at least a little bit of a low pressure area out here in the southern Gulf. 1002 millibars. That's probably a weak. That could be a strong tropical depression, maybe even a weak tropical storm, but most likely that could be a possible tropical depression. And the new model that just came down a few minutes ago still has a low, a little bit of a deeper low, maybe 996 on the millibars. But notice how much closer it is here to the Mexican coastline. So it wouldn't have a lot of chance of development, and it appears that it would probably just kind of slide its way into Mexico. Meanwhile, yesterday's Euro was showing still about the same place where we would see a low pressure area, 999 on the millibars. So again, that's a strong tropical depression, maybe a weak tropical storm, but pretty far south. And then the one that ran earlier this morning actually had the low a little bit closer to the Texas Gulf Coast, which could throw some moderate rain there in the offshore waters here in Louisiana. And that's kind of what we've been discussing, is there's a pretty good plume of tropical moisture that could possibly be surging in out of not just the Caribbean here, but also coming out of the Pacific Ocean as well, which would indicate some heavy rains and maybe a flood threat. And I'm going to look at some of those rainfall totals that are estimated here for next week here in just a second. But something that would be inhibiting any development right now, we have a lot of wind shear here over the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So we wouldn't see much development there, but anything in this particular area here where we have light wind shear, we may be able to see something developing. But look what happens toward the middle part of next week when that low is expected to be there. There's a ton of wind shear over here in the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. You've got land here down toward the south, moderate wind shear over Texas. So even if it did develop, it wouldn't be anything very strong as it moves off toward the west. So minimal tropical storm. Maybe it'll get a name. We'll see. If it does, it'll be Alberto. If not, we might end up with just a tropical depression there. So what does that mean for us? Well, the Euro model, keeping the moisture a little bit more tight over the Gulf of Mexico, and then putting much of Louisiana more into that 1 to 1.5 inch range on the rainfall. So really not too significant for a 7-day period. So this would be from now until next Friday afternoon, so about 7 days. The GFS, though, tends to bring a little bit more moisture in, and you can see there are a couple of hot spots here along the Texas coast and even here in Acadiana, going anywhere between the 4-inch range and starting to get into the yellow, so you might be talking about 8 or 9 in there. So we'll have to wait and see where that moisture goes, how far inland it gets, and that'll depend on how much rainfall we end up getting. So the models are still kind of off on how far this tropical moisture is going to reach, but the models seem to be pretty much in agreement that we're going to have some kind of closed low pressure center developing over the Bay of Campeche sometime early next week. So these rainfall events were probably going to take place Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if they indeed come our direction. Water temperatures, of course, are quite high. Anything that would be developing, as long as it had the right atmospheric conditions, including low wind shear, would definitely have a chance here over the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea. Those Celsius temperatures, the magic number is 27. That's 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see we're well above that, 29, 30, 31. So you're getting into the 86 to 88 degree range when it comes to the waters. And some of these waters are warmer than what they would normally be during the last week of July. So we're a little ahead of schedule there. And the tropical cyclone heat potential is also quite high. This is Cuba right here, Jamaica right here, the Gulf Coast up here at the top, and then Central America kind of runs right through here. I know it's kind of a weird map the way it's set up, but the tropical cyclone heat potential measures the energy that's available out there, not just how warm the water is at the surface, but how deep those waters go. And you can see there's a tremendous amount of energy basically all across the Caribbean Sea. Again, the Leeward Islands are way out here and the Gulf of Mexico is up here. So virtually the entire Caribbean has got some heat potential. And then the loop current as well here over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico has a lot of energy too. So anything that tries to develop in this area would have a chance as long as the atmospheric conditions were good, such as low wind shear. So like we always like to do, we want to look at these model trends, and we're going to go beyond the initial tropical wave that would come into Mexico. And this is actually looking into the following week. So we're basically going from about Wednesday of next week through Monday, June the 24th. So what you see is a bit of a low pressure area developing over the Western Caribbean and then lifting up toward the Gulf Coast. This has actually shown up in several model runs in a row. So remember when we talked about consistency, a lot of them are bringing something out of the Caribbean and out into the Gulf of Mexico. Where it eventually ends is still pretty far out. There's been a couple of models that have pinpointed the Florida Panhandle. We had one that kind of touched the southern tip of Florida. I think maybe 2 or 3 of them came somewhere along the Louisiana Gulf Coast, whether it be Acadiana, New Orleans, or southwestern Louisiana. We had 1 or 2 of them that brought it to the Texas Gulf Coast, and then we just had a couple of them that just had it fizzle out here over the middle part of the Gulf of Mexico. But it is important to kind of look at these models, even though we know that this is not going to be the scenario on Monday, June the 24th. Looking at the trends day to day to day will give you a better update on what is happening, what could possibly develop, and it also gives you a better idea of when you need to start making some of those preparations or possibly making a reservation if you're going to be moving away from Acadiana if you're evacuating there. So just looking at these long-range models is more or less just giving us a guide of what could be happening, not necessarily what will be happening. But I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot of this on social media over the next several days. So I'm going to let you go here on this Friday. I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do, of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on those notifications. Tell your friends too. I really appreciate word of mouth. A lot of folks that I talked to last night in New Iberia had found the channel and telling their friends. And when I was expecting to get just about 100 subscribers, I crossed over 2,400 yesterday. So thank you for supporting Acadiana Weather Today. Dads, have a great Father's Day. Enjoy your weekend. I hope to see you on Monday. If anything decides to develop between now and then, I'll go ahead and get it posted on my social media pages. So have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday.